Well, hello, that's me again. Today is June 19th. It is Monday. Happy Monday, everybody. We love Mondays. We really love to work. And let's start with some things which many people actually ask me constantly. Can you give me, can you give us, rather, some explanation what combat effectiveness is? And I will kind of repeat today what I did in the videos which were dedicated to the operations, and that will probably fit really well with the situation in the special military operations, where the slaughter of the armed forces of Ukraine continues, and it will also explain to you how operational level officers think, what they kind of consider, and what is in the foundation. I'm not going to obviously go into the specific mathematical models and methods which are highly secret, top classified, which of course I don't know, for example, so many years passed by, but the fundamental mathematics, fundamental principles, of course, remain the same as for the gaming of war, such as I already presented to you some time ago, the link to the SWIFT software. No, it has nothing to do with banks. It has everything to do with how Pentagon models its operational planning, so to speak, and war gaming. And we will start with the simple thing, which is, of course, my friends, it is really simple, but let me start with this. This is Lanchester. Well, in reality, it's Lanchester Osipov, of course. It is the quadratic law and the basically law of the casualties, how to calculate losses. Because war is about casualties, it is all about killing your enemy and inflict as many as possible of the casualties on him. And if you can see yourself that Lanchester square law, we're not going to be talking about square law per se right now, but if you look attentively at those coefficients which they introduce, which are called A as alpha subscribed M and alpha subscribed N, those they are equal the fighting ability of each individual group in group 1. Obviously we have to have two groups fighting each other, and AN or alpha N equal the fighting ability of each individual in group 2. And this is fighting ability is essentially what comes down to in case of the two groups fighting each other, and it's the ability to concentrate the fire and conduct proper shooting. It's a classic shooter scenario, and as you can see yourself, all of them start with numbers M, subscribe 0 at the start of the shooting at each other, and end up with the M, the end result of it. And in general, the forces M over time, as you can see yourself, they have minus alpha N times N, which is they will be diminished with the speed, which is the product of the opposite number of the opposite shooters, and of course the combat efficiency. That's what it is, the fighting ability of the alpha N. Same goes for the force N, which will be basically decreasing or dying out, the same as force M will be shooting at them. And when you solve the simplest differential equations and you integrate both parts, you get this classic quadratic equation, essentially. As you can see yourself in the equation number 2, it shows you that basically everything is pivots around the losses, or rather how many people you have left after the engagement, multiplied by the, in this particular case, force M is alpha M, and force N is alpha N. And alpha M and alpha N, as you already see yourself, it's the fighting ability, which is the other term, so to speak, for combat efficiency. And this is the very basic thing. As you can see yourself in the inequality 3, what is stated? If you have, for example, force M squared product of the force M0, which is the starting force, you start before their losses, and multiplied by fighting ability is larger or greater than the same for the opposite force, the square of the opposite force, then suddenly you recognize, oh, I'm going to win. I'm going to give you a simple example. For let's say they have the combat efficiencies which are similar. Let's say alpha m equals alpha n, and in this case they equal 5, for example. But if you have the force m, which is 10, and force n, which is 9, guess what you're gonna get? You're obviously gonna get better in terms of killing your force n, because you simply have more. You multiply it, for example, if it was am, again, as already stated, I don't remember, what was it, 5, I said? So, okay, multiply 5 by 10 squared, you have 500, right? And you will have their combat ability altogether more than when you multiplied 5 by n squared, which is 9 squared, which is 81, multiplied 5 by 81, and you will have 405. So basically, you have a significant advantage there. And your combat efficiency or fighting abilities, those alphas as they call it, they are metrics which are not represented by any kind of units. They are unit free, so to speak. It's just the number. And when you go and you begin to understand or study what these efficiencies are, how they are calculated, let me tell you, that's where it all becomes very complicated, and that's when obviously the Lanchester law also and models there are casualties models and as Osikov called the victims of war, and you remember I demonstrated to you how those differential equations transform themselves. It becomes very complicated. But then again, what is combat efficiency? How you calculate it? And let me tell you, this is what people go and study in the military academies and war colleges. And let me demonstrate to you on, for example, this losses model or casualties model on the example of the naval warfare. Of course, naval warfare is the discrete warfare because you have very specific units, and especially in missile exchange. But let me show you something, how even combat efficiencies and things which matter are accounted in, let's say, augmented or embellished, for example, salvo equations by famous mathematical model by Glenn, late Mr. Captain First Rank Hughes, or Captain Hughes, Wayne Hughes, and here it is. If we go and see for ourselves how the salvo model effectivenesses are brought in, so to speak, as you can see yourself on the top, number 1 is delta B, is obviously the reduction of your number of shifts being taken out of actions by the force alpha. And guess when you look attentively at what, for example, alpha primes are or B3 primes are, if you look at it, you will see yourself that alpha prime is fighting power in hits of an attacking modified for scouting, training deficiencies, and effect of the defender B prime distractions countermeasures. Wow, and look at this. Suddenly your alpha prime, look what it is. It's a product of sigma A. Scouting effectiveness. Okay, what is effectiveness of scouting? We'll discuss it. Tau A, training effectiveness of A. Okay, that's an interesting thing. Then you have rho B, distraction countermeasure effectiveness of side B. And then, of course, you have alpha number of well-aimed weapons fired by each A ship. And then you also have this product of B prime 3 in this formula. Guess what it is? And you go into the B3 prime, which also is product, including that delta, defensive delta B, defensive readiness alertness. And then you have the tau B, training effectiveness of B. And it goes on and on and on. As you can see yourself, everything in those equations. Be them ground forces appropriate Lanchester model, or be them salvo model, which is appropriate for the missile exchange. You see yourself, everything is built about effectiveness. But what is effectiveness? And here it is. It's not something like, yeah, I'm so cool, I can kill 2 people before you kill me. Well, it is effectiveness of sorts, but of course this is not how real and modern warfare or combat works. You can increase your effectiveness being a very lousy fighter, but if you have, for example, just let's say helicopters, combat helicopters behind you, guess what? Your effectiveness obviously grows, and you have to account for it, and that's how it becomes extremely complex and requires a very serious mathematical apparatus and all those combat computers, to understand what you need and what required force you have to do. For example, what is sigma A, which is scouting effectiveness of somebody? Well, it actually usually expressed as the mathematical expectation, which is the weighted average, but it also could be expressed as a probability of detecting something. Or scouting. Scouting is basically ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. It's how you detect things. So you can go either with the, for example, mathematical expectations of some detection system or the weapon system, radar, sonar, optronic systems, or what have you. Or you can go, depending on the situation, with the probability of the obviously detection of some specific thing in some specific combat conditions. And it could be a high probability of 0.9 ability to, for example, find their enemy's aircraft or enemy's battalion or what have you. Or it could be, low probability, let's say between 0.95 and between 0.6. You obviously will go with 0.95. And this explains how those effectiveness are calculated. And again, as I already stated, the combat effectiveness is actually a combination of all those things, and you can see it either as probability, you can see it as math expectation, essentially, and guess what? It also math expectation in terms of how many of your armor you will need to take out the enemy unit. And for example, some say in combat, I already kind of presented to you once before, a simple problem on how to calculate the required force of tanks with the mathematical expectation of 1.3 shells required to annihilate some specific target. And that was a mathematical expectation in terms of defining the target. What is the mathematical expectations of sinking U.S. Navy nuclear aircraft carrier, for example, by something like Kinzhal? It could be 1.3 or it could be 2.7. We don't know. These are all secret data. This is the thing which of the highest possible level of secrecy, and it will never be disclosed. But this is also mathematical expectation, which tells you about combat effectiveness, both of weapon system, and especially you can calculate it for the units or formation which use Kinzhal. Be that, for example, what is if combat effectiveness of the squadron of, for example, MiG-31Ks. Each of them, 12 aircraft in the squadron, and each of them carries one Kinzhal. What is combat effectiveness? Under different circumstances, it could be very different. Because in the end, they could be intercepted by, let's say, U.S. forces in some kind of ambush. However, highly unlikely, but that's what it is. So, and then suddenly your effectiveness drops. To give you an example how the fanboys and U.S. media and probably many of those U.S. generals define this effectiveness, here it is. Here's one of your classic BS things, and this is about how can I say it? Yeah, this is F-15. You see, oh yeah, there's the website, it's military porn, there are amateurs sitting there, and they think that if they have been in Afghanistan, they saw the real war, and they say, oh yeah, look at this, 5 reasons the F-15 might be the best fighter of all time. Before the development of the F-22 Raptor, the F-15 ruled the skies. And one of the any people who have any degree in engineering, and let alone military background, they have to ask the question, ruled where? And why they are the best fighters? By the way, what is the F-22 Raptor? Why it is the best? It never took part in any combat. So, but here it is. This is how they make their basically argument. Apart from the argument that it's a beautiful machine and it flies well, well, of course, it will not do anything that Su-27 can do. But still, but here is their war correlates. They say, look at this. By all substantiated accounts, their 15 record in combat is a whopping 104-0. And they say their 15 and its variants were used to great effect by Israel against Syria and Lebanon, the United States against Iraq, and the Saudi against Iran. Their 15 was also the airframe Israel used to destroy an Iraqi nuclear facility during Operation Opera. This is fundamental reason why they talk about that it's the best fighter and extremely effective. Well, as you can see yourself, these are the issue of the framework, as we understood. And how you count your effectiveness? Well, the first question which any normal military professional asks is, has F-15 ever operated in the electronic warfare and air defense systems dense environment? No. What kind of the air forces it operated against? Well, with all my respect for Syrians, Syrian Air Force is not exactly the modern and advanced Air Force. And then when you begin to collect this, it's like, oh yeah, 104-0. Well, and then you begin to look at the score of Russian pilots against actually 300 S-300s, which Ukraine had, hundreds of Buk M1 and Buk M2, and almost now we're looking at what, 900 combat aircraft, both fixed and rotary, destroyed by half of them at least by Russian Air Force. Well, let me tell you, F-15, when you look at this and in terms of combat effectiveness, and especially if faced with even Su-35, which carries R-37, I don't think so its effectiveness will be that great, but sure, you know, for the propaganda purposes and for graduates of the Top Gun Maverick School of Advanced Military Studies, sure, that will work. That works for PR primarily, but this is the only thing they can do, really. And when you look at this and you begin to compare those numbers, then say, here it is. The real combat effectiveness starts from here, from training of the personnel, the effectiveness of the ISR complex, from command and control, and all these C4 things, and then you have to basically count them in. How you count them in? Well, that's why you go to military academies. That's why you go to war colleges. They teach you there. I'm not sure what they teach in war colleges in the United States anymore, though. But then you begin to understand how it all changes depending on the circumstances. And when you look at these formulas, you see yourself that combat effectiveness is this extremely important coefficient. And that is why when you look, especially read things of this nature, for example, like this guy, Chris Panella, you see, they say Russia can't really fight Ukraine at night because Moscow's military is so broke and degraded it cannot afford night vision gear for its troops, war expert says. He says it in this SUR, which is Business Insider. But look at this, who this military expert is. Let me show you. I showed this guy for you a few times before. He obviously works for this Shyster Kagan Cabal so-called Institute for the Study of War. They cannot study war there. Even people who are big honchos there, they never won any campaign in their life. They lost every single war there. But I'm talking about the Petraeus, Keen, and other guys. But look at this. George Barros is the geospatial intelligence team lead and an analyst of Russia and Ukraine portfolio in the Institute of Study of War. His work within the geospatial intelligence team focuses on innovating ISW open source research methodology. I'll give you immediately the hint. They have no methodology whatsoever. Fact is, I begin to doubt actually military competence of those generals who are there. They evidently do not understand modern warfare. But look at this, who who is this kid is, and he is a kid. George received his bachelor's with honors in international relations and global studies, with a concentration in Russian and post-Soviet studies from College of William and Mary. Prior to joining ISW, he worked in the U.S. House of Representatives as an advisor on Ukraine and Russia for a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. In other words, the guy is ignorant and illiterate. Just let me tell you, a few years back, and you remember probably from one of my past videos, the guy was doing research on Russian movie theaters. So as you can see yourself, he is totally qualified, quote unquote, to pass. He basically invents things. He sits there the same as all of them, top bottom in the Institute of the Study of War, and they just invent lies. Russian troops actually have well-equipped night vision and actually conduct a lot of night operations. But hey, what do I know? And that's when you have those F-15, the best fighter in the world, and you have the guys who tell that Russians basically cannot fight in the night. But going back to the little bit of the CTRAP, as of yesterday, just for the month of June, the Russian Defense Ministry demonstrates the Butcher Bill. And this is for the 18th of June, as you can see yourself, with the in terms of 18th of June up to yesterday, 14,125 VSU personnel have been killed, annihilated by Russians, and that tells you everything you need to know. It is a horrendous number, and if it maintains this dynamic, which it will probably maintain, because Mr. Milley and Pentagon planners are committing war crimes by throwing basically the cannon fodder at Russians who annihilated in the industrial quantities, and probably we will see about field corps killed by Russians by the end of the month. This is the type of warfare nobody in Pentagon ever encountered in their life. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to plan it, and the only thing they have left is now hide behind their proxy, because they understand if the United States indeed puts the boots on the ground, it will sustain the same fate. Yeah, especially from Russian troops who cannot fight at night because they don't have night vision, if you know what I mean. So, and then that brings us to this another extremely important point. And this Russians, even yesterday, as you can see yourself, oh no, pardon me, it's today actually, that armed forces in Ukraine on the South Donetsk operational axis alone, trying to assault it, they actually lost more than half of personnel, and the numbers of those annihilated IMX, Leopards, Bradleys are just absolutely terrifying. And this was articulated to the RIA Novosti by the chief of the press center of the grouping troops of Vostok, the East, by Lieutenant Colonel Oleg Chekhov. So we're looking at absolute slaughter. And as I already stated, it's not anymore military operation in terms of for the VSU. Armed Forces of Ukraine. For Pentagon, it's a war crime. They're throwing people to their death indiscriminately because they're absolutely in panic, and it's just, how can I say, when the tribunal will start working in Moscow and Donetsk, International War Crime Tribunal on Ukraine, the names of those people who planned that, not only from Ukraine, but from London and Washington, will be named, and they will be charged as the war criminals. And then we go to this other thing, which happens obviously in the what have been closed now, the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And Mr. Putin there, apart from the fact that even the president of the United Arab Emirates, Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, complained to Mr. Putin, and this is in the recording, that Mr. President, we are receiving many threats, especially given the current situation with Russia, but we have made our decision and taken the steps, bricks, regardless of the conditions sent by the West. And let me put it this way, United Arab Emirates are one of the largest recipients of the Russian military technology. And so when you look at this, you understand that the only thing the United States and NATO can do now is to threaten everybody. And let me put it this way. Mr. Putin never does anything just because, and everybody sits today and speculates why did he do this. Well, what did he do? He did this. When speaking to the leaders of the African states, Putin reveals details of draft treaty on Ukrainian neutrality, which have been discussed in 2022 in Turkey. And there was almost the thing which was almost achieved there. The treaty on the permanent neutrality and security guarantees for Ukraine. And they were signed by Ukrainian delegation. And the draft stipulated that Ukraine must enshrine permanent neutrality. And there would have been no war, no special military operation. But, of course, when you look at this addendum, as you can see yourself, there have been some disagreements on the numbers of the, for example, troops of the National Guard. Russia wanted 85,000 for Ukraine and 15,000 of the military personnel and 15,000 National Guard. Kyiv wanted up to 250,000. And you talk about, there was a talk, and essentially they were so close. And then suddenly Ukraine obviously withdrew. And that was basically the start, the paths have been paved for the start of the special military operation. And when you talk about, and Putin was talking in front of the African delegation, why did he do this? Well, the reason that he did this is because you already have those signals that Mr. Putin does preparation for the start of a very interesting events on the front. That tells you also when he stated, well, 2 days ago, Mr. Peskov rushed to clarify, but I think so it wasn't the slip of the tongue. He stated that essentially we already demilitarized Ukraine, which is very close to the truth. Ukraine right now fights primarily with the Western weapons, and for all intents and purposes, Ukraine as a state doesn't have any economy left. And they cannot arm themselves, they cannot sustain anything. Everything what is happening right now, and that have been already stated clearly, Mr. Peskov stated, we are at the war with the combined West. Officially, this is official. And obviously they will be hiding behind the whatever left of the NATO proxy as much as they can. But the point is Russia will start implementing this cordon sanitaire for Russian new oblast or regions, and of course Russia will begin to build that ground bridge, so to speak, to Transnistria through, of course, way of Nikolaev and Odessa. And we know that the regime in Kiev is doomed now completely. And when you look at this, when you begin to kind of put this together, especially the fact that, for example, Mr. President of Czech Republic wants to actually put Russians in their concentration camps, which live in the Western and in Central Europe. So, and everybody of any integrity. So here's Glenn Greenwald talking about the fate of Japanese during World War II, and Czech president wants to use it as a model to emulate. Then certainly he suddenly begins to go back on this, Czech leaders tries to explain, call to monitor Russian citizens, and tries to walk back on his words. Well, it's too late. It's too late. It only proves what everybody was saying for a long time, and I'm saying this for a long time. The West wants Russians dead. A lot of them. The more the better. Children, women, what have you. This is the basically was main objective. And they were obviously being people very amateur in the real large-scale warfare. They miscalculated dramatically. To put it mildly, historically. But I already stated many times that I don't have descriptive powers to explain to you how they miscalculated. Historic in nature, yes, something outstanding, colossal, unprecedented in the history of the last 1,000 years. And so there you go. That's what we're observing right now. And to close up today the situation to which basically all those people really drove themselves into with their ridiculous rooting for Ukraine, which is the euphemism, hating Russians. Here it is. Here's how the idiots make their videos, for example. Look at this. Ukrainian pilot performs insane jump from aircraft carrier on FA-18 Super Hornet. So you see, it's 2.8 million views 1 month ago. And you can see yourself that it's Photoshop, it's stupid, it's ridiculous, but people still fall for it. Many of those fanboys who never heard about what is the combat effectiveness, how it's calculated, and how it is trained through a complex methodology of the combat training of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, what have you, let alone officers, it is impossible to explain it to that. It is also impossible to explain it to all those military generals, experts for CNN, for MSNBC, NBC, ABC, what have you. And when you try to explain it to average journal what it is, they will not understand. They don't have the toolkit. Apart from the fact that most of them are whores, and I already said, literally and figuratively speaking, and they spread propaganda and BS. But the point is, American generals cannot even come up with the good propaganda anymore because they have been exposed as military frauds. They know cliches. They wrote a bunch of the doctrines which are not workable. I am on the record. Those doctrines are absolutely unworkable. And now they see how the mythology, military mythology, is being blown out of the, to smithereens on the fronts of the special military operation. And that's what drives modern geopolitics. And in the end, as I already stated, if you look at the combat effectiveness, well, yeah, let's face it. Let's face it, let me introduce to the quote, for example, of my good friend Larry Johnson. In 2018, after the failed attack in the of United States and NATO on Syrian old air defense. Look at this. That's what Larry says. A friend of mine who has expertise in this matters wrote me, any air defense engineer with a security clearance that isn't lying through his teeth will admit that Russia's air defense technology surpasses us in the 50s and we've never been able to catch up. The system they have in place surrounding Moscow make our Patriot 3 look like a screwing nerve guns. Finally, there is the matter of the Russians as a second-rate military masquerading as a world power. Another friend who has spoken with military commanders at the CENTCOM AOR told me all the knowledgeable aircraft commanders are usually scared crapless about the prospect of a legitimate air-to-air skirmish with a Su-30 or any Russian air superiority fighter. But that is not what blowhards like retired General Jakin believe. Well, they do not believe in it because I already said American military planning have been exposed as absolutely amateurish. It's unbelievable. I never thought I would say this, and when you look at this. And that brings us to the back again to the point of combat effectiveness and why F-15 is the best fight in the wet fantasies of those fanboys from all those stupid military porn, and yeah, I don't want to go in there. It's so pathetic. It's ridiculous. So this is what I wanted to tell you today, guys, and as always, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel and support me on Patreon or maybe buy me couple coffees. So I'll talk to you later, guys. Have a nice rest of your week. Bye bye.